Welcome to Ceiling Shattering Tactics. We are here to elevate, innovate, and disrupt executive leadership by digging into the tactics and tools that have helped transformative entrepreneurs and leaders get to where they are today. So joining us is Elissa Weinzimmer. Elissa, thanks so much for being here.
I'm so happy to. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So now Elissa is an award-winning vocal health educator, presence coach, and founder of Voice Body Connection, a unique, concrete approach that empowers performers, leaders, and speakers to optimize their voices and share them more authentically, which I love the word authentically. I love that. So Elissa, tell us, what is your ceiling shattering tactic that has helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, it is not only teaching about embodiment, but actually running my business from a place of embodiment, making decisions from a place of knowing what I authentically, like you say, like I say, what I authentically want.
So wait, so what is that? How does embodiment help you with, advancing to your goals?
Yeah. So it's kind of a nebulous word. I'm sure a lot of people are like, what is embodiment? What does that even mean? If I were to ask you, and I'm talking to all of the yous listening, so all of us, if I were to ask us, what is the strongest sensation you feel in your body right now? And I'm actually going to ask. So take a minute and be like, what is the strongest sensation I feel in my body right now? And I'll give you my answer, which is that this is interesting. I feel like just a little bit of like flutteriness in my belly, right? A lot of times someone will say, I don't feel anything if we're totally disconnected from embodiment. But the reality is we're always feeling something. Our body's always doing something, and neutral or numb is a feeling, actually. So essentially, and I'll take you through the process that I take folks through, entrepreneurs and otherwise, which is once you know the answer to how you're feeling sensation wise, you can go, okay, why do I think I'm feeling that? For me, I'm like, oh, I think I'm a little bit nervous recording a podcast, which is interesting given that I do this all the time. But apparently here I am with new people and I'm like, I'm a little bit nervous. Cool. So I feel a little bit of flutteriness in my belly. I think that's maybe because I'm doing this podcast with you, and the emotion that comes up, which is the third question I like to ask here, is nervousness, like I said, but also if I were to really tap into my emotions, I also feel happy to be here. And then the fourth question that I like to ask is, what does that mean that you want? What are your desires right now? And I would say my desire is to share myself clearly with you. Mm-hmm. So that process of going into my body and then following it through to what I want, that's what I call the voice body connection process. And that allows me to take my feelings in my body and translate them cognitively and also share them expressively with other people. And that's what I mean when I say doing my business in an embodied way, is that I do this process or something like it over and over all the time to be like, not just, what class should I teach right now, but do I want to teach that class? And by the way, I have news recently about things that are changing in my business because stuff changed for me in an embodied way.
And so, okay, wait, I've got multiple questions that have come out of this, but first I want to ask, so when you're embodied, what does that help with? I can make assumptions because I feel like when you're embodied, you feel like you're able to accomplish things or you know what you shouldn't do. But can you explain to me more, like what does that me action-wise help me do? Or convey?
Yeah. I think I'll actually start answering the question by saying, what does it look like when we're not embodied?
Okay.
So what goes on when we're not embodied? When we're disembodied, when we're kind of, just a head on a body separate from each other, we can just keep going and going and going with what we've been doing without questioning whether it's aligning with how we feel. And we can get exhausted. We can get depleted. That's how we wind up in burnout. That's how we, I actually made this mistake somewhat recently. That's how we go through the motions of doing something we've quote unquote always done, even if it's just the last 2 years. And it doesn't go very well because we're getting signals like, it's time to change your tactics. This launch is not going to go the way you think it's going to go, right? So disembodiment causes us to kind of hang out entirely up in our head and our cognitive awareness and not actually check in with, what's really going on. So then the flip side is embodiment is a process of checking in with what's really going on. And that allows us to be like, oh, you know what? I know I have a nap I've flipped what I wanted to say. I know I have a meeting right now, right? But what I actually really need is a nap.
Yeah.
And this person will understand if I reschedule the meeting for tomorrow, like maybe it's someone internal at the company, right? And it's like, I'm really feeling depleted. I'm feeling exhausted right now. Let me rest for the next hour and I'll be able to come to you with clearer information about this tomorrow, right? And I know we don't always have the luxury of taking a nap, but I would argue that we actually do more often than we think we do have the capacity to go, you know what? I don't have the answers to the questions that you need in this meeting on Friday at noon. So why don't we reschedule the meeting for Monday?
And that makes sense. This because all too often we just push through. And yes. I get that. And I'm feeling that myself. Before I ask you, I want to ask you about your personal kind of journey with this. But before I do, I want to talk about tactics really quick that people can employ. Yeah. So should we be writing down these questions and asking ourselves this on a daily basis? Or how do we go about making sure that we are operating in an embodiment?
Yeah, great question. So this requires some repetition to get used to the process. And essentially what I do is train people to repeat it enough times that it starts to become internalized, because really the questions don't need to be perfect. But basically, if you pay attention to the questions I asked you, they're all different versions of feelings. Sensations are feelings in our body. Thoughts are feelings in our mind, right? Emotions are often what we call feelings, and desires are also feelings. We call those feelings sometimes too. So basically we're asking ourselves, what do we feel, but in a specifically constructed way and in a specific order. First, I go to my body and there are lots and lots of, psychosomatic therapists who agree with me that the body will tell you what's going on. So we go to our body first. That's why it's embodiment as a tool. Then we go, okay, once I'm in my body, what do I think that means? That's the thought about the stimulus, right? Then we can go to emotions, because a lot of times we'll get very tangled up in our emotions if we don't understand where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And then we can go to what we want, what needs to happen next, right? So if you want to memorize this process and you want my help with it, you can go to my website, voicebodyconnection.com, and my free mini course goes through this process. Will teach you what the whole thing is. And, but I think it's not too hard from what I've seen, in the hundreds of people I've taught this to over the last couple of years. I think it's not too hard to start to memorize those questions and get good at asking yourself the questions throughout the day. And I also have a PDF, which is a fun way to write them down. But yeah, however it works for you, you just want to start asking yourself, how am I feeling?
Amazing. And we're going to include the link to that in our show notes when we post. So great. So everybody can go to. So how has this helped you in your advancement, in your pursuit of goals?
Yeah. So essentially, and this hasn't always been an easy process, but it has allowed me to know when I need to take a turn from what I'm doing right now. Because otherwise I totally have the personality and I have been trained to plow ahead and override and just keep going and keep going. So the most recent example is I'm about to take a sabbatical.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny, I emailed you right before this call to be like, are you sure you want to do this? Because I'm about to go on break, and that's the biggest thing I want to talk about right now. But then I realized, of course I should come and share this, because this can be a glass shattering tactic for all of us, a ceiling shattering. To be like, oh my gosh, I need a break. I'm depleted. That's so, so, so important to listen to. So essentially I have designed, the rhythm of how I teach my classes, because I have vocal health classes and presentation skills courses that I teach every year. And I thought I had designed a perfect schedule. And then I started to realize this isn't feeling good to me anymore. Nope. Still not feeling good. This isn't right. It's a little bit too, it just requires too much of me right now in terms of how often I show up and need to be on. And so it needs to be redesigned. And I don't think I'm going to have the intuition about what that looks like until I take a break and rest. So hence the sabbatical. And that all came from being embodied.
That's incredible. It's so important. And the reason why I was like, yes, please come on and talk about that, because I think all too often, and I am so guilty of this, that if we don't have ourselves to give, if we're depleted, like you just said, what we can't be giving our full selves. And so why push through when what you could be doing is taking just a little bit of a break, knowing yourself, replenishing, and then you've got that to give of yourself to whatever it is. It's an initiative, company, family, everything, right?
Yeah.
And so knowing that is key. And I think all too often we're not doing what you say is checking in with ourselves, checking in with that embodiment, and knowing when we need to take a replenishing break.
Totally.
So I am so happy that you're sharing that, because I think that we could all use that check-in and know like what, and just really quick with sabbaticals, with breaks, like time frame, how do we check in and know how long we need, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're asking me that question right now, because I don't know the answer. I'm like, I think I need to rest for the rest of eternity is how I feel right now. I'm so tired. But I don't know, actually. And part of I mean, this is want to talk about, shattering the ceiling. This is my edge right now. I keep wanting to promise all of my students a date by which I will return, but that actually defeats the entire purpose of taking the sabbatical, because I need to let it take the time that it takes. So I have one group that is resuming, I know, in late March, and everything else is a TBA.
Wow. Okay.
And that's so edgy for me. It's so hard, but it's, how are we, the answer is we don't know. I think that's the answer. There's no way to know until you wait and get your intuition.
I can't wait to follow up with you after your sabbatical and find out how you feel and what it's done. So I can't wait. With that, I want to turn it over to Anne, who is going to talk to you about our Dear Future Disruptor segment. Go ahead, Anne.
Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your tactic with us. I thought it was so important how you talked about connecting with your body to enter a place of embodiment, because I know they talk a lot about that in yoga, but also I made a connection during the pandemic. I know that even though it's something that we have zero control over, a lot of people have, including me, that urge to consistently work and be productive. And I think it's so important that we take time to listen to our bodies and really understand what we truly need and want. And so I'm just going to ask you two really quick questions, and you can answer them as in-depth as you would like. So the first question is, what is one decision you made that has changed the trajectory of your life?
What a good question. Well, I have no doubt this sabbatical is going to be the most recent example of it, but considering that I'm just embarking upon it, I don't know how it's changing my life. A decision that changed the trajectory of my life. Wow. The reason I got into vocal coaching was when I was 21 years old. I, at that point in my life, was going as a performer. I was in musicals. I was in an a cappella group in college. I was just like pushing to get through my college experience academically and in terms of my performing. And I had a vocal hemorrhage and severe onset of acid reflux. And basically my voice gave out. And at the time, the existing wisdom in the speech science world was take a month-long, talking about sabbaticals, a month-long vocal rest, no speaking. And I did. I didn't speak for a month. And during the course of that month, I became so curious about my human voice and how it worked and why it had failed me and how I could do things differently. And so talk about left turns, I was a performer. And when I came out of that, I was a voice teacher. And it didn't happen over the course of a month. It was a gradual process, but it changed my entire career and has led me to be doing what I'm doing today. I would say, I don't know if it felt like it was a combination of being guided in that direction and a choice, but I definitely did make a choice not to pursue auditioning, not to pursue acting, not to pursue performing when I came out of college.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And my second question is, what are some resources you would suggest for new leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to double down on, the theme of what we've been talking about, which is to explore, I'll put it this way, to explore taking care of yourself. And I think that a lot of leaders do understand the value of this, but it's always surprising to me, especially working with executives, working with CEOs as I do, it's always surprising to me how difficult it is to switch the cart and the horse order in terms of what comes first, self-care or work. A lot of times we really, because we live in this, productivity oriented society, it's like we have to meet these deadlines. We have to, get to these goals come hell or high water. This is the way it's going to go. And so we do whatever we have to do to our bodies, to our spirits, to our energy to get to the place of productivity. And it is not just about, drinking a green juice, taking a bath, buying yourself flowers, switching the order of like putting your self-care first sometimes means canceling a meeting to take a nap. And I know when I first heard ideas like that, I was like, that's outrageous. Like, that's impossible. Like, I can't do that to people. If it's on my calendar, I do it. But it's important. And as more of us do it, the culture will shift around us being really able to honor what's truly going on in terms of how we take care of ourselves. And obviously in the middle of a global pandemic, I think we all understand we need to rethink our way of working.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it's so important that we preach self-care, but taking that step forward can be so difficult and challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you, Elissa. This has been so impactful listening to this tool that we should all put into our own lives and embody. And I will also be posting where people can connect with you and go to the link to find out more information themselves. So that is it for this week's Ceiling Shattering Tactics. If you would like more information and insight into the toolboxes of influential female leaders, such as Elissa, follow Mind the Ceiling on social media to get the latest updates. Thank you so much and see you all next week.